Trade deadline season has been wild. The Canucks are making moves. The whole league is making moves. Coming up today on today's episode of Locked On Canucks, we'll dive into the evolving trade rumors between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Vancouver Canucks and talk about some realistic pieces who could be involved in that deal. Is Brock Boeser being traded? Who knows? But you got Beggsy, you got Bowen, and you're listening to Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. And that's right, Locked On Canucks is back. My name is Trevor Beggs. I'm a Canucks writer and a part-time credentialed media member at Daily Hive Vancouver.
Let's go, man.
Let's go. Hey, and that's Kyle Bowen. But before we dive into our first show, we want to thank you for tuning in. And as we get into the groove, we hope you get into the groove with us and make Locked On Canucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, where the best way you can help us grow is to listen every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And I'm stoked to be here with my longtime brother in pain. We've both been suffering through covering this team for our whole lives. Kyle Bowen, my brother. How you doing, man?
Whole lives? I guess you could kind of somewhat say that. Covering the Canucks our whole lives. Kind of, right? You got. If you really think about it, you're a young chap. You watch every game. You're going to school and you're talking about that game. You're not recording it. You're not producing something out of it, but you're still talking about it. Yeah, we've been covering the Canucks since, 2002, 2001? So thanks for joining us. And, Beggsy, I got to say, man, for the first time introducing the show and doing an ad read, bro, you're talented, man. You're talented, man.
Hey, that's why I'm happy you're doing the show with you, buddy. And I don't think I'd be doing this on my own because, I got a big ego and I need a little tire pumping. And I know you're there for me for that. Covering this team and watching this team is not a lot of fun. But this week's been a ton of fun, man. I mean, what did we miss? Seriously, in the last 24 hours, Patrick Kane gets traded. Jonathan Quick gets traded. But, of course, this is the Canucks podcast. We're talking about the Luke Schenn trade, which is probably going to be the third thing we talk about today. But the first thing we have to talk about is all this smoke between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Vancouver Canucks. And let me just break down the timeline a bit for people who maybe don't have all the moving parts. But on Sunday night, Shayna Goldman of The Athletic tweets out that JT Miller could be traded. And then on Monday morning, we find out that JT Miller is in fact not traveling to Dallas where the Canucks played because he was injured. Was it a real injury? Was it a fake injury? Who knows? But I think we assume it's a real injury. And then yesterday, everything really started to happen. Matt Venzel from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reports that the Canucks and Penguins discussed a JT Miller trade, that it was the Canucks who initially called the Penguins to see if they had interest in JT Miller, who, of course, was raised about 40 minutes away from where the Pittsburgh Penguins play. And then Shayna Goldman, again, she was on fire, man. She continued to add fuel to the fire by saying that the Canucks wanted to move a substantial player with term prior to the deadline. And then the talk started to shift from JT Miller to Brock Boeser. Patrick Johnson from the Province tweeted out that Brock Boeser was the Penguins' primary target. Others started to follow suit. Then the Penguins waived Brock McGinn and Mark Friedman to clear up cap space. Kyle, what did you make of everything that happened yesterday? And how do you see this playing out?
I definitely think that there's just way too much smoke about this JT Miller going to Pittsburgh thing. Look, there's no chance that Pittsburgh is taking $56 million off of the Canucks books to acquire an almost 30-year-old JT Miller. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to happen, especially with that core. Malkin, Letang, Crosby, they're still talented players, but they're towards the end of their quote-unquote careers. And I mean, by the time you're in year 3, year 4 of that JT Miller extension, which hasn't even kicked in yet, there's a good chance that 2 of those players could be gone for Pittsburgh, So it doesn't really make any sense for any team really to just take on that type of deal without the Canucks having to do a little bit of taking on themselves when it comes to obtaining some salary. And I don't think the Canucks are even going to go down that route because it would just be a slap in the face to themselves, because they had an opportunity to do this last season. Then they extended JT Miller, and 7 months later they're gonna take something off the chin to get rid of a guy who, let's be honest and let's be real, the dude is not a bad hockey player. He's far from that. He's put up a lot of points since he's been with the Vancouver Canucks, and I think he's always going to put up those points. And again, I don't think the Canucks are going to take any salary / take a lot less just to get rid of that contract. I just don't think Rutherford and Alvin have it in them to like get rid of that much pride to make a move like that. Like, that was one of their first big moves. Now, if you go over to Brock Besser, that one just makes way too much sense. Way too much sense. Brock Besser's, done a lot for the community, been around for a while. But for me personally, I just feel as if the dude deserves a change of pace, a change of scenery, something refreshing for the dude. And he's gone through a lot over the last couple of years. And his output for the Canucks, I think, if you look at the numbers, it's not the worst. It's far away from being the worst. But with that salary and just seeing him game to game, it just seems like it's time. It's time to move on from Brock Besser. And I think if the Canucks can get something from him and for him, and use Pittsburgh as their trade partner and possibly get a defenseman back, that's the route that they're going to go. But I don't know, dude. I don't know. Why would Pittsburgh want to trade a Pettersson, one of their defensemen, for a guy that's making a lot of money in Brock Besser and can't even crack like the top 6 consistently sometimes? You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I feel like this may be like one of those Vancouver media / let's talk about something type of stories, because it just seems too good to be true. Again, Brock Besser's making a lot of money, Trevor. A lot of money.
But here's the thing, right? We talk about it maybe being driven by Vancouver media, but this is Shayna Goldman from The Athletic. I think she lives in New York. Like, she's definitely not a Vancouver Canucks reporter making these reports. That being said, I think her initial report was about JT Miller. And I think later in the show, maybe we'll touch on Miller and some other wingers on the Canucks with term who could be involved in this deal that aren't really being talked about. But for now, the smoke is around Brock Besser, and I think the Penguins just need to make a splash. They are mediocre offensively. They're 13th overall in goals right now. They're mediocre defensively. They're 16th in goals against. So I think they just want to make a splash. I think Ron Hextall is under pressure to make a deal right now. And we've seen for Brock Besser in the past, for the first 3 NHL seasons, his first 3 full NHL seasons, at even strength, he scored at a first-line rate. But the last 2 seasons, he's just fallen off a cliff. And this season in Vancouver, I think it's pretty telling that Andrei Kuzmenko got all the opportunity ahead of him. And now Anthony Beauvillier comes out of nowhere.
Beauvillier. Is it Beauvillier or Beauvillier?
Beauvillier. Not like Bolivia. It's Beauvillier. My bad.
Come on, Trevor. It's the first episode, man.
There's many more screw-ups to come, but we appreciate you. We appreciate you listening to us.
100%. And, sorry to cut you off, but that's another thing, too. I'm not sure if the Vancouver Canucks are putting Beauvillier on Pettersson's line just to raise his value. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Maybe he gets shipped off after less than a month of being a Vancouver Canuck, but he just puts in that work, and he's a different type of player in your top 6, and he's visible almost every shift because of like his work ethic. And Brock Besser's not a lazy player, but he's a different type of player. And I don't know if he really fits that Tocchet mold. And again, Tocchet just got here, and he's not even giving Besser a sniff with Pettersson, who like Brock
and
Besser,
that's why I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's why I think Brock Besser could have some success in Pittsburgh, because we've seen this season he has not played with a puck distributor. There's only one puck distributor really on the Canucks at center, and it's Pettersson, and Miller to a lesser extent. But as we know in Vancouver, this hasn't been Miller's best year, especially at even strength. If Besser goes to Pittsburgh, Crosby and Malkin are 2 of the best playmakers of this generation.
I blame us.
They both have their own line mates right now. What's that? Sorry.
Again, I just cut you off again, Beggs. We got to have some cues there. But you just got me riled up for whatever reason. I haven't been super, super impressed with JT Miller this season, but I will say, man, for whatever reason, and I guess the biggest reason is, back checking is important and playing defense is important and blah, blah, blah. You're getting paid a lot of money. You got to do a little bit of everything. But it just seemed as if going into this season, we as a city, as a nation, we just want to change the way JT Miller was doing business on the ice. And it's kind of, I don't know if I can swear on here, but it's kind of crazy. Okay. We'll bleep that out because he's been one of the best offensive contributors across the league over the last couple of years. Like you could argue that he's like top 30, top 40 in points. And all of a sudden he signs this extension and we just want to transform this player. And we didn't even want to do it gradually. We demanded that JT Miller turn into, like a top 30 Selke candidate out of nowhere. And it's just, again, I know he's a professional athlete and he's supposed to ignore the news and ignore the fandom, but man, since he signed that extension, we just wanted more and more different things from JT Miller when maybe we should have just left the dude alone and let him do his thing. And that's be a point per game player and just create chances. And I don't know, just for whatever reason, I think we're just expecting way too much out of a player that was already doing too much. A lot of good things for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, you heard it from Kyle Bowen first. Leave JT alone.
Leave JT alone because we're stuck with him. $56 million, bro. He's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there was this tidbit from Sportsnet's Ian McIntyre on a radio interview earlier this week. And on the road last week, he talked to JT Miller, who told Ian McIntyre that I'm not going anywhere. So he's either bluffing with Ian or he's not going anywhere, which is the most likely option. And I think you're right. It's a crazy hockey market. And JT, again, set the bar really high for himself last season and hasn't lived up to it this year. And for that reason itself, fans are criticizing, and obviously there's the contract. And let's not beat around the bush. The Canucks should have traded JT Miller. It didn't make sense to sign him based on his age, based on where the Canucks were at in their cycle, but he's here now. So exactly. I think, Canuck fans should probably just accept that he's here and make the most of it because he is still a talented player. Now, Kyle, I do want to talk about some potential trades involving the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Vancouver Canucks, some potential pieces that could come back in return. But first, let me tell you why I have a day job. I use Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners with you every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessment, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements. One of the things I love most about Indeed is you can find candidates like Kyle and I instantly. Whoa. With Instant Match, over 90% of employers get quality candidates as soon as they sponsor a job post, according to Indeed data. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer is valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And before we get into some of these potential trades that I talked about, let me say something obvious. The NHL trade deadline is this Friday, March 3rd. Join us live on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel from 11 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, breaking down the biggest deals from across the league. Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do on deadline day? Now we're part of this network. We got to cover the Canucks real time now. Are we like cracking beers at 9:00 in the morning or what?
You know what? If I wasn't working at a day job, I would crack a beer at 9 a.m. It's not the earliest I've cracked a beer this year. That was Super Bowl Sunday, or I guess Super Bowl Monday because I was in Indonesia watching it. So first beer that day cracked at 7:30 a.m. But hey, you and I are working, man. You and I got to hop on here, and if there's any trades to go down, that is. I mean, there's so much has happened. It's been such a wild trade deadline season. I'm not sure what's going to be left on Friday.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And again, Beggsy and I are working a lot, doing a lot of things in this thing called life. And I think that's why, if you're watching this or listening to this, follow the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Beggsy's having having a second child soon. Okay, so let's help this guy out so he doesn't have to work 18 hours a day, so he can take his children to soccer practice. Okay, for real, for real. Subscribe.
Yeah, seriously. I wasn't sure how my wife was going to feel about it when I kind of talked about potentially joining Locked On, but thankfully she was supportive and said you should go for it and chase your dreams. I wonder
Wow.
if she might feel differently once once I start getting into the meat of this 5 days a week. But hey,
Of
man,
course. Yeah, like,
you
what
and I
is
are living the dream, man.
exactly? I could definitely see, one of your children having to go, ice skating or something, and you telling your family like, yeah, I can't do it because I gotta talk to Kyle on Locked On Canucks and talk to the people most importantly. Which it happens, yo. Who's more important, these people or the family? We'll find out. We'll find out.
Yeah, if we're in your earbuds right now, you're the most important person to me. I just
There
want to
you
say that
go.
right
One
now.
love. I love you. I love you. If you're listening to
Wow,
this,
wow,
I
that was
love
deep.
you.
That was
I see.
nice.
I know you have the itinerary in front of you, but would you? Speaking of love, are you going to be like, if if a guy like Brock Besser goes or any Canuck goes on the deadline, are you going to be like a little sad? Do you have like any connection to any of these players? Now you've been in the dressing room, you've been talking to them. Is it a little different for you?
Well, I think we'll touch on this guy at the end of the show, but
Okay.
Luke Schenn was probably one of the best guys I dealt with, and now I will say for the viewers, locker room access only opened up again this season, so this has been my first year being in the locker room on a part-time basis. Well, Luke Schenn, just really easy guy to talk to, like willing to answer any question. So yeah, I really enjoyed Luke Schenn. And in terms of Besser, who's the other, primary focal point of this episode, um, I would be happy for him to get a fresh start. There was one story I know I told you before, but I was in a scrum with Besser that night against Arizona back in December, where he was going to get healthy scratched. Dakota Joshua got mysteriously injured, and then Besser ended up going back into the lineup. It was Hockey Fights Cancer Night. He ended up scoring in that game, and he was super emotional after the game, talking about how much it meant to him to play and score in that game because of his father who passed away. And then as he's like almost in tears, like talking about this, the next question was, so you're in trade rumors with your agent. And I cringed so hard. Like, I get from the media standpoint why you ask that question, the people want to know this stuff. But from a human standpoint, it was tough to hear. It was tough to see the look on Brock's face going through that. And yeah, I know these guys make millions of dollars, and it's easy kind of sit behind our phones and computers and criticize. But that was a moment where I really felt bad for Brock. So you mentioned before that we hope he gets a fresh start, and I just hope he's happy, man. I hope he finds some happiness and rediscovers that success he had in the NHL during his first few seasons, whether that's in Vancouver or elsewhere.
Oh, 100%. And again, you and I are doing this, and so many people do this on different levels, and fans just in general, they kind of do this too. And we can go ahead and criticize players and get mad at players and say the things we want to say because I don't know. That's how this dynamic somehow works with sports and fandom and people, and it's kind of doesn't make sense because there's not really a right time to be quote unquote mean to anyone in this thing called your life. But here we are doing it pretty much on a daily basis. With all this being said, again, I'll say this: Brock Besser is one of the. I've never met the dude, but from what I've heard and from how he's dealt with things with Vancouver through his time here, dude, the dude seems as if he's one of the greatest human beings on earth, for real. He just gets it. He gets it, for real.
Yeah, it's a good deal, and that's why it's fun to discuss trades, but there is that human element aside from it. But that being said, this is a messy transition, but I do want to talk about 3 potential trade scenarios involving the Canucks with Besser, and maybe it is Beauvillier or Garland as well. I think of Besser, Beauvillier, and Garland, Besser's been the most disappointing this season, and he's the most expensive. So it's kind of fair to wonder, whether Beauvillier or Garland might be the target instead. But let's stick with Besser for now as the potential target. And again, whether it's Besser or another winger, I kind of see 3 potential options here, or 3 scenarios. The Canucks trade Besser or said winger to the Penguins for defensive help. And 2 of the targets that are most discussed and make the most sense are probably Marcus Pettersson. He makes just a shade over $4 million a season, which expires 2 years from now in 2025. Or Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who only makes $825,000, and that deal expires in 2024. I'm going to throw out a third option, and that is Jeff Petrie. I know the Penguins just traded for Jeff Petrie, but he actually plays less than Marcus Pettersson. especially at even strength. So I do wonder if maybe the Penguins, again, Marcus Pettersson's younger, he's cheaper. Do they value him more than Jeff Petrie? Jeff Petrie makes $6.25 million a season, so $2 million and change more than Marcus Pettersson, and his deal also expires in 2 years from now. Do you see any of those players as potential fits for the Canucks in your eyes?
Well, I think I would love for them to get someone like, is it Pettersson? Is that how you pronounce it as well? Damn,
Yeah, Marcus Pettersson. So we could have 3 Petterssons on the Canucks.
Exactly.
I think that would be pretty hilarious.
Including 2 defensemen that have that same last name. I just feel like it's such a pipe dream to get a guy like that who's making not, quote unquote, not a lot of money. And from what I've heard, based on some radio shows in the city, he's been Pittsburgh's best defenseman this year. That's what I'm hearing. I don't watch a lot of Pittsburgh Penguins games, but I just don't see that type of deal happening for Brock Besser or Connor Garland or Beauvillier. I just don't see that happening. You brought up the Joseph kid, and again, I've never watched the D play. I barely know this guy. I think that's where they could go. And if the Canucks could shed that much salary in a trade like that and acquire a defenseman back that could work out, that's a win. I mean, that's the thing about this whole Brock Besser type of trade. Even if the return isn't a lot, just having that dollar amount off the books is going to do a lot for this team who's paying $8 million for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. So it's like, that matters, bro. Real talk.
Yeah, 100%. So that's kind of scenario one. Besser or Winger gets traded for defensive help. Number 2, it's probably the option I like the most, is Besser for a cap dump and kind of juice that return, get a higher draft pick in return. So some of the players I had in that cap dump category, and to be honest, I think the only one who is a true cap dump would be Brock McGinn, who just got waived. He's likely gone unclaimed by the time we finish recording, although who knows? Kasperi Kapanen got claimed, so I could see Brock McGinn also getting claimed. He makes $2.75 million, and that deal also expires in 2 years after this season in 2025. He's one of the Penguins' top penalty killers in terms of ice time. So I could see him included in any potential return as well. Canucks obviously penalty killing help. And then in that, we know that. One of these episodes, we're going to talk about this historically bad PK, because it's pretty wild the Canucks are going to set history there. But some other players in that cap dump category, I talked about Jeff Petrie. He could be in there, $6.25 million, 35 years old. Jason Zucker, $5.5 million, expires this year, so he is a UFA in the summer. Rickard Rakell has been tossed around. He makes $5 million, but they just re-signed him. He's signed for 5 years past this season as well. Rakell and Zucker are both in their top 6. I do wonder. I don't know. We talked about it off the top. Does this make sense for the Penguins? It obviously makes sense for the Canucks to try to clear some cap space and get some futures. But, Zucker and Rakell, although they've been up and down, are both in top 6 roles for the Pens. So,
that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense, bro. It makes no sense. Why would they move all those pieces around, even though I understand the dollar hit and the logistics behind a situation like that? But why would they do all those things in order to bring Brock Besser in when they're in win now mode? I feel as if they would want to keep some of those guys they did sign or who they believe in, add Brock Besser, to the mix and take a run at it, So I just don't see those things happening, especially because, once again, it's not, Brock Besser's not lighting the world on fire. He's not an impact player every game. You know what I'm saying? He's probably going to give you just as much value on most games as Rickard Rakell, real talk. Just the way it is. The way it is. Again,
although he is 5 years younger, he's 5 years younger too, which is worth mentioning.
Yeah.
And that's why, and even in this last category, I still think actually that Connor Garland might make more sense for the Penguins. Middle 6 guy, cheaper salary. Ron Hextall said he wants someone with term. And, if Brock McGinn and Mark Friedman do clear, the Penguins should have $4.25 million in cap space. The Canucks obviously have about 7 because of LTIR.
Yeah.
So if you trade Connor Garland for, let's say, Brock McGinn, a pick and a prospect, the cap works both ways. So that could be a potential option there. I will say, and that was kind of my third category was, Besser or Garland or said winger for a cap dump plus a prospect. So the only prospect I really like in Pittsburgh in terms of my viewings have been Philip Helander. I believe he was a Toronto pick who got traded at some point. But he kills penalties. He's even played a couple NHL games where he's been a big penalty killer for Pittsburgh. His production, he's gone from almost half point a game to point a game guy in the AHL. So the Canucks are targeting a prospect. He's a versatile center/winger who kind of kills penalties and does it all. So he's the main guy I like. I'm not really a fan of most other prospects in the organization, and their prospect pool is ranked 29th according to the Athletic. So you're not going to get too many grade A prospects out of Pittsburgh, but I think Philip Helander is the one to kind of target there.
Mm-hmm. There you go. I wish I could add on to that, but yeah, I don't know anything about this dude. So carrying on.
Well, we're kind of agreeing that it's Connor Garland to Pittsburgh, eh?
Well, that's a really interesting point because I could see the Canucks moving off of Connor Garland, and I could also see them, in other terms, or for lack of a better term, doubling down on Connor Garland and just moving forward with him because of his connection with Rick Tocchet, and he may fit that mold. And we're kind of seeing what a guy like Beauvillier could do with a guy like Pettersson. I'm not saying Garland can do the same things, but maybe he could. Just
he did it for a stretch last year.
Exactly. So it's that work ethic, that type of player that you can kind of pair up with a guy like Pettersson. Now, do you need two of those guys in your top six? I'm not sure. Taking up close to $10 million? Probably not, because this team needs a lot of help on the back end, and clearing out some cap space can be a way to go get that. So Rick Tocchet, Connor Garland, can see that continuing. Yeah, just a lot of things, man. Holy moly, dude! This Jim Benning, bro.
I gotta cut you off right there. You're gonna go. This is gonna go way too long.
He's never gonna get a job again. He's never going to get a job again in the NHL.
Yeah, all the best to Jim Benning and his family. We can rip Jim Benning in the offseason. There's lots of time for that. The Canucks are still in a mess because of him. But in the final segment, we got to talk about an actual trade the Canucks made. But first, let's talk a little bit about the NBA. I know you and I are trying to become big NBA fans here. But the midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on everything there, from the money line to point scores and three-pointers drained. For example, the Portland Trail Blazers, who are my team, are on a 4-game skid after getting crushed by your team, the Golden State Warriors, last night. And tonight, my Trail Blazers play the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't like them winning on either the spread or the money line on the second night here in back-to-backs. But you can also bet player props on FanDuel. And after putting up 71 points in one game earlier this week, Damian Lillard is hot. You can also find exclusive bets like 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Wow. Back from commercial break. And I just remembered what you said about a couple minutes ago about FanDuel. Bro, you sounded like an NBA fan. I just got to say, bro, Trevor Beggs is a professional at this, for real. Dude, first time doing ad reads like this, and you're doing it, man. You're doing it. For real. I'm
and shout out to the Locked On team. They told you don't read the ads for the first time on air. So I did give them one read through before hopping on. So I felt pretty warmed up and seasoned,
Incredible, man. I'm proud of you.
Speaking of a guy that seasoned, the Canucks traded the oldest player on their roster yesterday, and that was Luke Schenn, who went to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I will say he got traded for a 3rd-round pick, which I think was completely fair. I know people in Vancouver were thinking, why couldn't he get a 2nd-round pick? I think that was classic fans overvaluing a player in their own market. Luke Schenn has played above what people expected of him, especially 5 years ago when he was almost out of the league. But at the end of the day, I think Toronto kind of sees him as that 6th, 7th defenseman. And why you trade more than a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick for a guy like that? Yeah. I will ask you can give your thoughts on the trade too if you want, but would you want to see him back in Vancouver? And do you think it's going to happen?
I think there's a better chance now, and I can't take credit for this analyzation of things. I think it's been said in the market over the last, 16 hours or whatever, but the Toronto Maple Leafs are actually in this area, in this world, right? I think they just played Seattle. I think they're doing like a West Coast road trip. They're playing the Canucks on Saturday. Luke Schenn is expected alongside his wife, obviously, or his partner, obviously, to like having another kid. So I think the Canucks, I don't know if they went out of the way to like really look out for the guy, but it just kind of allows Luke Schenn to be here longer while he waits for the team to get here and possibly witness the birth of a new child into his life. So I think there's a bit of back scratching done here, and it was nice. It was nice. Maybe that's not the biggest reason they did the trade, because maybe the third round pick was appetizing enough. But it was cool seeing the Vancouver Canucks go down this route, because in previous years, especially with that betting regime, bro, they didn't care about things like that, man. They didn't care about things like that. And Luke Schenn has been a great ambassador for the team. Bro, in an era where nobody's dropping the mitts, this guy did it so many times to defend guys like Quinn Hughes and Pettersson. You know, he just wasn't afraid. And I have to admire that, because those two players are players that are going to do a lot for this organization, you know, that are going to dig us out of this hole. And Luke Schenn took fists to the face for those two players, and he did it over a couple of years, and he got better, bro. And, you know, you and I, a bit older in this thing called life, right? We've had our ups and downs. Luke Schenn, dude, years ago, this guy's washed out of the NHL, given no chance. Yet we've seen his work ethic improve. He's never given up, and now he's playing the best hockey of his career. And it's kind of unseen, because the league went a total different way. Right around year 4, year 5, year 6 of when he entered the league, and it kind of didn't work out for him. It kind of went against him, but he never gave up. And I'll say it again, he's playing the best hockey of his career. Toronto got a good defenseman, bro. They really did. In fact, now he's a bit of an outlier in the NHL. I'm not saying, you know, he's a top 4. He's gonna be the most important player in the series, but I feel like he's put himself in a position where he can be a slight difference maker. That's because he's a different type of player in this NHL. So I'm impressed by him, and I do think the Canucks, again, by scratching his back, do have a chance to re-sign him. And I think he likes Vancouver. He likes the area. He's a bit older in life now. Maybe he just wants to stay put with his family. So yeah, I could see the Canucks re-signing him. That being said, it's not going to be the worst thing in the world if they don't. For real.
Yeah, I'm going to go on the record right now and say that Luke Schenn is not re-signing with the Canucks. And I'm gonna reference the UFA market from last season. I think Jan Ruda, similar player, went for who's on Pittsburgh, I believe was like 2.5 million or 2.75 million.
Look at what Goodbranson got last year.
There you go. Luke Schenn's a better player than Goodbranson. Goodbranson got 4 million. So
exactly.
I mean, Luke Schenn will be 34, so I don't think he's getting Goodbranson money. But I think Luke Schenn could be in that $2 to $3 million range, especially if he has good playoffs with the Leafs, which
he deserves
individually. I hope he does, but I hope Toronto has another first round loss.
He deserves it.
Not Toronto lovers here on the West Coast.
Luke Schenn deserves one more contract where he's getting a significant pay raise. Like, real talk, $2 to $3 million over like 2 or 3 years. That's what he deserves. And yeah, just I don't know how that happened. How did I become such a big Luke Schenn fan, more as a person than a player? Real talk, because he just never gave up. That's incredible, yo.
You know why? It's because he's a beauty, just like you, Kyle. You are also a beauty, and I'm stoked to be doing Locked On Canucks with you. I've told you off the record. I'm going to say it on the record. I wouldn't have accepted this gig without you, because you and I created some magic, man. We've been doing this for a little bit, and I'm covering this crappy team is better when I'm talking to you about it.
Yeah, man. Well, yo, friendship matters, and you've done a lot for me, and you've been loyal to me, and you've partnered up with me with a lot of my projects on my network all week with Kyle Bound. You can check that out too if you just follow me on Instagram or Twitter. So again, when you asked to do this, it was an obvious yes. And now, with that being said, I did it for you, but now I'm doing it for you, and who I'm talking to with that second you is the listener. For real, I'm doing it for the city, for real.
There we go. Well, that wraps our first episode here on Locked On Canucks. Thanks for making Locked On Canucks your first listen every day. Now make your second listen game to game. Locked On NHL. Every moment, every performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across Locked On NHL with the local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on Audacity, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Kyle, until next time.
Wait, we got to ask a question. We got to ask a question to the people, okay? For real. They got to be engaged in the comments below, okay? So what should we
Who's
ask?
getting traded, Brock Boeser or Connor Garland?
Who's getting traded, Brock Boeser or Connor Garland? And are you going to miss Luke Schenn?
There you go.
There you go. All right. I guess that's it.
That's it. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.